podzielimy.
Nie, podzielimy się, tylko pytam organizacyjnie.
To ja muszę szybko spocząć.
My się możemy dzielić.
Nie, to nie o to chodzi. Chodzi o wiedzieć, co kto chyba.
Nie, coś czuję, że będzie jeszcze jeden.
W ogóle idealnie by było, jakby był jeden. Wtedy nigdy nikogo nie mógł, że...
Oj, ale że każdy marzy o takim panelu, że gdzieś sąsiedzi są, a nie, że zgadzają. Przerywają sobie. Taka dynamika telewizyjna.
To możemy się umówić, że się podchodzimy.
Przeszkadza wolność.
Chcemy nowego porządku światowego.
Hello, welcome ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zuzanna Nowicka and I have the pleasure of chairing today's session panel on freedom of speech on the internet. Katarzyna Sadło, a columnist, one of the first political blogs in Poland. Marcin Olender for public policies in CEU in Google. Andrzej Saramonowicz, a scriptwriter, director, and Krzysztof Izdebski, activist, social activist, technology and democracy relations expert. I'd like to start today's panel by delineation of the topic and decide what we're speaking about. The first question goes, because at breakfast you said that freedom of speech is freedom for, freedom from. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I suffer from stage fright speaking first. When speaking about freedom of speech, we think about many words, that is communication. Let me start by thinking, what is freedom of speech? When speech is free, when is it no longer free? Speech is free whenever used according to its designate code. When we deny the sense of words, the words vanish. They are not obliviated, they just vanish. Why is the word important? Because word is creative. There was the word at the beginning, and the word was with the God, and the word was God. What does it mean? The word is the world-creating power. How can a word create a world when it is not used as a sense? When it is used in its anti-sense? I live by my words. When we deprive a word of its sense, and there have been historical situations, Jan Kowalski or Aaron Rubinstein were deprived of being Aaron Rubinstein or Jan Kowalski. The only sense of their life was the number of the Aram. They were annihilated well before they were sent over to a gas chamber or crematory, and they were just biological waste. They were no people. The same happens to words. There is a country in the world, I've read recently, where the ruling party uses the names of words with falsified designates. This is Law and Justice. This is one big fake news. And let me refer to, allow me, Madam Chairman, and all of you, to Łódź-based poet's creation. The street named after him is just around the corner. Above all, the words of our words twisted by frauds will be returned to true and reality when law is law and justice is justice back in their original meaning. It's not my political provocation. It is the restoration, the return. If we don't use the word according to its designate, it's no longer a word. It ceases to exist because one word, one designate. It is no longer true and truthful. Can I carry on? And this is a very important delineation worth pondering about between true and lie. What is truth and untruth? This is scriptwriter's perspective. I want to talk about it with lawyers. We use words according to designates. Francis Fukuyama said about it in the context of many Americans believe that Donald Trump won the election in 2020. Although this is not true, that hits American democracy, this is not a normative, not allowable in a normative fact. So this question goes to Krzysztof Izdebski. Do you agree with the saying that this is not doable legally wise, and do you think that untrue information deserves the protection from the point of view of freedom of speech? Hello. Answering from the end, everybody has got the right to enjoy fake news, even if these bring about harsh consequences. Therefore, the difficulty how to regulate it. I am a user of the internet myself. Why should I be deprived of the access to fake news? If the fake news make me happy and find them amusing, not necessarily do I realize what they mean. Therefore, the legal discussions are kind of targeted at GDPR. We had GDPR, well, we're supposed to be informed about our rights. You had to click specific things. And this is for greater transparency of the information provided on the internet. So I'm going to continue on this political note, referring to what one of the four speakers said. I believe that the greatest number of fake news is generated by the politicians. And this seems to me that politics as a phenomenon would have suffered without fake news, because they wouldn't have much to say. Why am I mentioning this? At the European Union level, and the movement that has been initiated by a number of the countries in the world, maybe not many, is the one that increases transparency of the content on the internet. This is the advertisement and similar context, because an advertisement might be manipulative and misleading, so we know who's the author. We know how algorithms operate. Marcin may develop it from the perspective of Google, so that the internet platform's responsibility boils down to the fact that we know how this is prompted to users. If we had a quotation, I'm going to use a quotation too, because it's a pretty poetic mood that we are all in. I want to point out to the risks associated with limiting freedoms in the world, including the fate with disinformation fight. I'm going to read a short recitals of the act of the bill that Mr. Ziobro and his collaborator created. It is not officially in motion, but there is one sentence recital, believing there is the specific value of freedom of speech, constitutional value, in order to enhance its role in the search of truth. So freedom of speech is supposed to search for the truth. I don't know whether it is not a denial of the freedom of speech as such. So if Marcin Olender, another question goes to you. Speaking about this freedom of speech, many people, Facebook may not agree with what Mr. Izdebski disagree, Donald Trump and the other one for 2 years. The accounts were suspended. The responsibility of the social media providers is reverberated on numerous occasions, including Digital Service Act and other European Union regulations. So they introduced this very large platform notion, and the very large platforms' responsibility is even greater. What can these platforms do? Should they set the borders to the freedom of speech? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question and for inviting me for the meeting. Not necessarily do I agree that Facebook does not agree with what Krzysztof said, but it's got its limits. By principle, we are of the same opinion. We start with the notion that freedom of speech, freedom of uttering your ideas is the default state of things, where you can air out your opinions at your own discretion, bearing in mind all the negative consequences this may bring about, because it is not forbidden not to tell lies. By principle, it should be allowed. We agree. I believe that all the platforms agree here, and they have a similar opinion. However, there are specific situations when you tell lies, it may cause actual damage or dangers in actual real world. So this is the border, the thin red line. Facebook has got this red line in some other place compared to us. It depends on the kind of the platform. Is it push platform like Facebook that has got an active feed, or pull like YouTube? But there are certain limits, and the limits exist, and there is a huge controversy. You were speaking about this digital act. Yesterday we had a discussion, there was a different milieu here. At the end of the day, the platform has got this gray scope, gray zone. Nobody questions the things that are illegal. The hate speech is qualified. It's forbidden. Holocaust denial is one of the examples. So this is one of the many things that are illegal. So these cannot be disseminated. But there is this kind of gray zone where platforms may set out the limits of any kind, like us in the case of COVID. This President Trump case was a physical threat to people. Therefore, we instilled actions. We updated our policies in the case of COVID so that any kind of disinformation, dissemination, anti-vaccine disinformation that shows that they are lethal or harmful, that Bill Gates injects something into your body. We believe that in this kind of situation, when we are in danger of the pandemics, by discouraging the people from vaccinations may result in people's deaths. So this is dangerous enough so that the limitation of freedom of speech is justified in this particular case, though as many silly things have been disseminated on YouTube for many years, and they will continue to be there. Nobody cannot forbid saying stupid or untrue things, and I think it remains the fact. With this little reservation that we have some kind of thin red lines, which might be liquid. Before the pandemic, we might have said other things because the tolerance was greater. When human life or stability, social stability is in danger, some kind of reaction is very much wanted in our opinion. Therefore, freedom of speech, yes, but there are certain borders that should be set out. And you mentioned this Minister of Justice Act, the bill. It was quite brutal. Anything that is legal must be allowable. And pornography is legal. So would we have to put pornography on YouTube? No. Our option, our view is different.
Thank you very much. once we are in this law presented during a January conference of the Ministry of Justice, I would like to touch other aspects of the freedom of speech. We've talked about provider's perspective, legal perspective. What about the user's perspective? One of the provisions in the Act says introduce a protection of personal rights against a person of unknown personality, blind indictment. What are indictment? What are the threats relating to anonymity in internet? Well, I would like first to disagree with you. What you said about people who, by giving a number, became a biological waste. It would be very bad of us if words of a group, a large group, deprived us of humanity. They still were people, humans for themselves, for us. It's not like using a bad use of a word will change the nature of things or phenomena named badly. Though it's a good way for discussion how far the language can shape, but it does not bring that big revolution to that a big and loud group of people could change the whole concept of humanity. You gentlemen, I have doubts. I am not a supporter of unlimited freedom of speech. I wonder why the freedom of speech on the internet should be bigger than in the real life. If in the internet, for claiming that somebody is in a way bad, if we can be punished for defamation, why shouldn't be the same on the internet? I would go for the virtual world like for the real world. It is more and more real. And I disagree with Krzysztof, whom I like, that everybody should have a right to fake news. I believe governments do not have that right. Corporations do not have that right. I'm afraid I cannot hear the speaker when he is not using the microphone. But it's not the user's perspective. If I have the right to get fake news, I give somebody the right to sell it to me. And I disagree. COVID that you mentioned is one of the phenomena you can discuss. Who makes the decision which phenomena are serious enough to restrict the freedom of speech? Why COVID is, other things aren't. For me, as the user, the key is who and by which criteria will they decide. If it's the authorities, they will always follow their political interest or the sake of the state, which the way they perceive it, not necessarily we do. These are things for me as the users, but I do support that blind indictment. If there is no mechanism to get consequences from people who do something wrong, I'm not talking about big things like anorexia. I'd like the people who have such pages and truly harm millions of children in the global scale, that they should be punished. If not that blind indictment or a form that would first decide whether there is a breach or not, and then to find the perpetrator, then the alternative would be the deprivation of anonymity on the internet. So register, provide your name, send scans of your ID so that the providers know whom they have. Because sometimes cause, like in the case of Mr. Sikorski, who sued FACT against anti-Semitic text, though these were not publications by the FACT, but comments of the internet users under some bit of information. So if the editor is responsible for any content published by anybody, that editor will opt for the privation of that anonymity to protect their own businesses. We can have the right to defend if somebody names us bad name or claims we did something wrong. Somebody claims we are thieves, so we should have the right to defend. I believe I haven't answered any of your questions, but the topic is, it is very difficult to talk on it. By my approach to the freedom of speech on the internet has evolved, but that's because the internet has changed. 20 years ago, it was a place where the public debate democratized. Now it is demolished. So we should sort of follow the time, the changes, and see what the internet is used for, to warm up conflicts, to the things that hurt us, not as individuals, but societies. Thank you. If this blind indictment is a good, interesting law instrument, could you, in brief, explain how? Well, in the text for Okopress, you wrote interestingly, it means the role of the state is not to interfere in public debate. So how can the state regulate it? The blind indictment is a side effect. It's related to the internet. There are many such plots in terms of disinformation or combating disinformation. They go beyond the internet. They also apply to traditional media, like in France, where it strongly relates. And I agree with the limited trust to politicians. They produce most of the fake news. So these laws aim to regulate all the issues near the elections. There is this disinformation impact on certain democratic mechanism or future of ourselves and of our children's. What is interesting in those bills and in this act on the bill presented by Mr. Ziobro is the stress on something different, that content may be removed from the internet to protect the people in that content. There are certain milieus, I could see Michał Bilewicz here, he will provide better examples. I will quote none. I will refer to how I remember them. That the right wing is more persecuted on the internet, and the right wing content is removed more frequently than the left wing content. It's not really true. It's an issue of sensitivity. It's whether we want to have sensitivity included in legal regulation. When this bill leaked, we found that it is very bad when the state takes the role of something more than an institution to issue licenses, like for TV broadcasters. That has been so far a formality, but the recognition which content that can breach personal rights, like homophobic content, which in Polish law is theoretically not banned directly, the law aims to not to remove such content. So I do not know whether politicians, the website, social media portals created certain regulations, cooperation rules with the society. There are trusted organizations to decide. But as the internet has become an agora of on a global scale, where everybody can jump into, and it applies to all aspects of our lives, including those on sensitivity, freedom of speech, I do not know if the state and the politicians who do not adhere to those rules on the daily basis should be the people who control the public debate, who claim which content can be included and which cannot be included in a public debate.
Tak, odwrócę troszkę.
Well, it seems to me we are midway for the state to decide. A long time ago, it decided about many things when it introduced regulations for punishing, for calling the president an idiot, for negating the Holocaust. The ship is off. Now, should we follow that path? How far? Who will decide? Or do we quit? But it is a myth to assume that the state does not decide about those issues, because it does. And in terms of this bill, the state interferes into what service providers should decide about, and this is one step too far. If I want to use any website, I want the website to protect me from being called bad name. It can be by blocking or by removing users who sort of regularly do bad things. I see no reason for the state to interfere into my relations with the service provider, as it does not interfere into the fact that a guy who uses bad language in a pub can be thrown out. I wouldn't treat the virtual world as if it followed different rules than the regular world. If we ban something in our real life, we shouldn't discuss whether the state should interfere, because it does.
It seems to me that first and foremost, I don't understand this trust for the state. If the state is Mr. Ziobro's state, there's much to be afraid about. But normally, we believe there is a democracy that's got other regulations rather than authoritarian state. I wouldn't be afraid of the state that much. I wouldn't be afraid than leaving the regulations in the depositories of the internet. Why should Google know better what kind of content to introduce, or Facebook rather than the state? You said that you do regulate. We don't know on the basis of what kind of criteria. It's kind of hidden, clandestine. Some of them are allowable, others not. By the virtue of the resolution of a huge consortium that is as strong as a country or a number of countries, which decides about it in camera. Being myself an active user of Facebook, I was blocked for a number of days because I found something outraging. I found it outraging to use the notion pedały do gazu. Gays should be gassed. I was banned for using Polish word pedał, which is pejorative, an old faggot or whatever. Algorithm Facebook is described in the book called Dear Gestapo, Here I Inform You. So you use the word pedal, fag, faggot. Nobody's interested in the context. I just use it, defending people who are run down on by this notion. This is idiotic. So I prefer a kind of state to do it. I was banned for 7 or 30 days, I don't remember. If you allow me, I do not agree. What comes as a surprise for me, Krzysztof, is that everybody's got the right to have fake news. You assume, wrongly in my opinion, you assume your opinion, an informed user of the internet who is able to separate the truth from lies, and you are able to enter this convention. You find it amusing. But the question is, we're returning to porn that you were speaking about. Porn is allowable, but we do not agree to show it to children. Why not? Because children are not ready to learn about sex life from porn. Zimbardo described it as a big problem. Many people get knowledge on intimate life from porn, which destroys their spirits. And this is what we are facing here too. Allow me to return to what I wanted to say. Not that I'm obstinate. Telling the difference between the truth and lie is difficult. Not truth is false description of reality unwillingly. A lie is an informed kind of information disseminated. Untrue, something untrue is based in lack of knowledge. Fake news is a lie. You want to control the world. You want to manipulate people. If we agree to manipulate people, this is something I cannot comprehend. There should be a regulation, in my opinion. The regulation for counteracting untrue things is education. Execution is the tool to fight with lies. And this kind of execution, companies that create or manage the internet, they will tackle it. As you said before, I didn't answer your question at the beginning. Two little things, O and D in Polish, about our attitude to freedom, from and for, freedom from, to translate it into English. So we know what the difference is all about. As a matter of fact, we should require companies that deal with the internet to take over the function that is played by the police in other places. This is the police that secures our freedom for and from, freedom for public assemblies, and freedom from being attacked. So we have the right to expect that we'll be free from being attacked. And fake news is an assault. This is not a demonstration of freedom. It's a demonstration of a rape, of an assault. Somebody who wants to assault me or rape me. Fake news cannot be said to be allowable because this is rape. This goes to Marcin Olender because you said that this is the internet provider that acts as police. Francis Fukuyama showed the theory, and Facebook is very much in line with this, to create an impartial council that resolved the notion that charged the suspension of Donald Trump's account. So, do you think the supplier should be wearing police shoes? Not in the sense of police in a strict sense. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. In my domain, so let's use this quasi-legal language. In my domain, over the content, every operator exercises this power. As Katarzyna was saying, to protect users against this kind of activity, this kind of content that users do not want to be a subject to. They do not want to be attacked. Speaking about what you were saying, why should a company decide about it? This is the free market of ideas and solutions, kind of. So we could see the example in Poland. There's a group of people who were not happy with how the discussion was moderated. They found it too restrict, and they set up their own playground. Every supplier is in this situation because you can set up an indefinite number of platforms with different variations and variants. Of course, law observed, things that you can or cannot do. Pornography is not allowed here, but there is lots of porno pages, and you can see many more or less interesting images. Share them, comment, that's okay. every company makes the resolutions on their own, bearing in mind their users and their expectations. There are places where people hurtle abuse on one another and find it amusing. But the society, the general public that we refer to, has got highbrow requirements, and we've got some other stakeholders, that is, advertisers that pay for it at the end of the day. And they want this agora to share thoughts, to look cultivated, kind of. So this is a dynamic setup that every company needs to answer as they should, within the scope of the legal regulations. As you said, offline laws should be the same as online laws. That's true. The Council of Europe, in the famous declaration, highlighted that. And that's the case. If somebody is offended on a platform, it's okay. It's not okay. They can be charged, but the technicalities is the problems, because you are anonymous. But you cannot abuse or offend anybody because it's on the internet. There is a very interesting aspect that the court ruling, when the state resolves, because the empire of the state needs to say what is right, what is wrong. If the French want to remove something that is in Poland that has been posted by the Polish users, so there was this right to forget this GDPR rulings, where the European Commission had to rule out whether this kind of injunction, because there is the collision to the right of freedom and freedom of speech. These kind of things there'll be more and more of them. There is a formal and informal pressure on the level of legislation, but that's not the only example. The German one, the French one, more and more people want to have impact, and these opinions diverge. Although by the concept they refer to the German Act, the 180 different angle that they are operating at, they require companies to react faster and to remove more from their website. We're about finishing. Companies to grasp the balance. Twitter might be more tolerant. On YouTube, less, because we've got a different business model. Each of them tries to introduce order of any kind, so that they retain balance between the freedom of speech. What Krzysztof was saying, everybody has got the right to say something, and what should be protected to against what people may come across online. Can we speak about balance of any platform? Because there's a corporation first that has got their own world vision, as every corporation has, and the key stakeholders are the advertisers, who have got their own visions of the world. This balance between the freedom of speech in every media corporation is to the detriment of the user. But the question is, how much to the detriment, how much the advertisers and corporations impact the content. So this is a kind of illusion to say that there is a tension, because it's not equal. Tensions like between an employee and employer, there are two parties of this, but it's difficult to speak about this balance. By the virtue of the power, it's very important to discuss it, the problem of advertisers. Should a corporation be a police person, they are not invited. There is a court over them, a court of law. And there are rules and regulations that decide what a police officer can do and cannot do, what a judge can do and cannot do. So who is the police person to stop the word from being disseminated is the beginning of the discussion about the whole procedure, and who is the judge at the end of the day and how it is executed. 5 minutes. One more aspect of the conversation. I'm going to ask about what is happening in a situation where this is the recipient, that there is a policeman, and they are ostracized. So, for example, J.K. Rowling is on transsexual people, suggesting that they can use the toilet based on their own selection rather than physical traits. This violates the safety of women, and very fast the internet saw the call to stop promoting their works, reading their books. This is not that popular in Poland, but in foreign countries, is it justified? This is part of some kind of stormy discourse. There's a new reality, the internet. This will be the subject of pressure, and pressure will be changing depending on the situations unveiling. There is nothing of that type in Poland. Sometimes we reach absurdities because I need to be brief. There are some kind of fabs for what we do. Some things become more active, less active in specific periods of time. Our sensitivity acts this way, so we are more faster to react, to assess, to adjust. So we should be distant, kind of. We should have limited trust, because there's a kind of exclusion, anticipation of exclusion, because somebody might be anticipated and might be excluded, and they are excluded because of this anticipation. This happens. The world becomes more and more polarized, especially the right-hand side and the left-hand side of the political spectrum. They like this kind of exclusion because it generates the greatest emotions, and the greatest emotions trigger the greatest interest, which is kind of to the interest of these domain managers. The greater the discussion, the greater gain of internet providers or internet managers, managerial bodies. Moderated. I'll be defending my right for fake news. What emanates the internet, this is excommunication form, checking out somebody from reality as it has been happening for thousands of years. Microscale, microscale. So, am I deprived of the right to lie in this room? I came here by Hyperloop from Warsaw. It doesn't seem so that somebody would be thinking about this. But we want to regulate a fake news, a disinformation notion, which is not sharp. And you've got a vision what this could be. There are specific criteria. There is this kind of sensitivity that we differ, that I don't trust. The role of the government was to instill tough against criminal policy, eye for eye, kind of. Wherever they tried to enter the domain of freedom of speech, this generated more problems. If I lie, there is a bomb in this building. Fake news, first and foremost, but it was penalized. This might be an infantile example. If we decide to control, the sensitivity differs depending on the region. I work in C region very often, and there is a greater trust for corporations rather than to the state. Quite a different discussion if we discussed about it in England or France. May the authorities regulate it? I can see more threats. There is no good way out of the situation because we, as the humanity, we are quite complex, to put it mildly. I need to say one more thing. You're making a little mistake where you juxtapose fake news with fiction. There are two different things. You have the right for fiction. Film is fiction. Literature is fiction. They are not lying. If you say that you came here by something that does not exist, it's fiction. If you want to advertise this kind of corporation, whatever that is, to sell it, you're entering a different domain. As the case with a bomb, you need to say the natural need for fiction and the need to be protected. We should entangle us. This is the question of freedom. Let's not labor the point with fake news. We are speaking about the tool, and its limitation is a danger. We need to finish further off stage because we've got time to end wording. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Dziękuję bardzo. Dziękuję.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihrer Ausreise.
Now boarding flight 1215.
You may now kiss the bride.
Work is different now. We're commuting less, virtually meeting more. Separating work life and life can feel challenging. It's easy to forget that to thrive at work, we need to take care of ourselves. Microsoft Viva Insights offers new experiences to balance productivity and well-being. Personal insights help you stay at your best and most productive. Add structure to your remote workday by opting for a virtual commute, carving out time to have a productive start in the morning and mindfully disconnect in the evening. Protect time before your calendar fills up for focused work, coaching, and learning. Take regular mental breaks with Headspace, tapping into dedicated moments of mindfulness. Use emotional check-ins to tune into your day-to-day mindset and well-being. Strengthen team bonds with Stay Connected experiences that prompt you to praise collaborators, schedule one-on-ones, and follow up on pending commitments and outstanding tasks. Insights for managers and leaders offer windows into how work happens and the impact on employee well-being. Identify where teams may be isolated and take action to break down silos. Quickly discover opportunities to prevent burnout, promote coaching and development, and boost engagement. You and your team's well-being is important, especially in times of change. Taking care of one another allows you to thrive and your organization to build resilience. Experience how new well-being insights in Viva can help.
Liberté Talks to co ważne. Seria Liberté Talks realizowana jest dzięki wsparciu Google oraz Państwa darowizną. Na podcast z klimatem zaprasza Jakub Wiech.